Hello, I'm Noah Bradley, and today we're going to be doing some sort of pixel art landscape sketch thing. This is pre-recorded and I'm just narrating it now, so this is all at 2x speed. I don't actually paint this fast. Anyway, as soon as I post this, I'm sure a million people are going to tell me how this is not pixel art at all, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I know what pixel purist will say pixel art is, and that's fine. It's cool. It's fine. But that's not really what I'm interested in showing today. I'm sort of interested in showing kind of how I sketch out these ideas, both for people interested in doing like actual pixel art, and also for people that have no interest whatsoever in doing that and just want to maybe improve their digital painting skills, maybe just want to dive into digital art for the first time ever. Any sort of reason. This is sort of for everyone else. So anyways, I'm just sort of blocking things in really roughly, very similar actually to how I would take it as just a regular old digital painting. I treat it very similarly. Pretty much the only difference is just the tools are a little bit different. Rather than using all the fancy brushes and stuff, you just use pretty much just the pencil tool. You'll see here I'm using some of Kyle's brushes. As it turns out, he has some pencil tool presets, which I didn't realize until I started doing this, and can sometimes provide some pretty nice texture, especially for blocking in before you want to clean up anything. So I found these to be pretty nice, but a lot of those same techniques would apply that I would use on this as I would on any other digital painting. So you saw earlier I was sort of messing around with the colors and stuff, just using the same hue saturation that you'd see anywhere else, or the color balance stuff. All these tools that are in Photoshop are still available for pixel stuff. It's just doing little minor tweaks to make sure that it's working and not adding in little random pixels of other colors and stuff. So making sure you're turning off anti-aliasing on stuff and making it all nice and clean and crisp and stuff. And obviously this sort of approach is not going to get you the nice, super clean, tight, amazing pixels right away. That sort of stuff takes a long time. But if you start with something really sketchy like this and put enough time into it, obviously you could refine it to the point that it is, what pixel purist would say is actual pixel art, and that's fine. But anyway. One thing I want to kind of mention for people that maybe don't have any interest in pixels for themselves is how helpful this is as an exercise in other digital painting. This is actually, I think, a really good exercise for anyone interested in any kind of digital painting, because it teaches you how to get by with pretty limited resources. You're extremely limited by the canvas size, obviously. I think this one was, 256 pixels wide or something like that. Really tiny. So you're limited by that, first of all, and having to get in all of your detail in this really tiny space. You can't zoom in and noodle away on a really tiny area all the time, because most of the time you only got 4 pixels to work with there. And you got to imply a lot with those. So the smaller size you go, the more you have to learn how to imply things. And I think that's a really, really good skill as an artist, is learning how to imply a lot of detail without actually painting a lot of detail. I think it's a really useful thing. The other thing that I think is great is teaching yourself how to use really limited palettes. It's not obviously necessary anymore in pixel art to have limited palettes. There's no real functional reason for the most part to do that, but it's sort of a heritage in that that tends to go on of using really, really limited palettes and trying to get the most mileage out of those colors that you possibly can, and using odd sort of colors in odd sort of places to make do in other areas. And I think that's actually a really important skill for any digital painter, because you start to find interesting ways and interesting combinations to use those colors in various parts of your paintings. And it tends to tie things together really well if you start to do that. So you'll see I just kind of continue to block in, trying to figure out the lighting, trying to figure out, what limited colors I could use that are kind of cool. You'll see that I'm using like a little darken layer here to get some effects and stuff, to try to figure out my color palette. And here I'm going and selecting just that color range. It's pretty easy to select a certain color in your piece if you're doing this stuff, because all you gotta do is hit select color and you just set the tolerance to 0, and then it will select every single pixel of that color. Same goes for the fill tool. If you deselect the contiguous option, it lets you fill in that entire color and replace it later on. So really useful tools. Photoshop is not obviously designed at all for doing this stuff, but you'd be surprised how much useful, amazing stuff is in here. One thing that obviously I'm not showing, but might be useful for some people, is to turn off the pixel grid that I think is on by default in Photoshop, because that will just drive you insane. And furthermore, make sure you kind of have 2 different windows open so you don't have to constantly zoom in and out to get an idea of what your piece looks like. So I would say go into Window and hit New Window for whatever this is, and open up a new window and then tile them so that you can see both at the same time. I think that's an important thing. So using some more of the texture brushes here, again, to get some of that random pixel effects going on. This is the sort of stuff you could do by hand with just a 1 pixel brush, and that's fine. But for me, sketching and stuff, I'd rather let a little bit of randomness get into my work first, and I know I can always go back in and clean stuff up if I want to. But for this stuff, I'm just more interested in getting the general shapes in there and getting a cool composition, cool lighting, and a nice color palette to go with it. I'm trying to keep my colors to a minimum, trying to find ways to reuse those colors in different places, and constantly tweaking those colors too. You'll notice throughout the painting I start to change some of the colors entirely throughout the piece, just because I find something maybe a little darker, a little greener, a little redder would work in different places a little bit better. And also finding places that perhaps I'm using colors that are super similar, and I don't really need to use 2 colors where one is going to do. And so again, just trying to learn how to reduce and simplify stuff. So I think this is it's really good practice. And I'd say it's even really good practice for people doing character stuff. Learning how to get a good character design in a really tiny space, say 32 by 32 or 48 by 48 pixels, is really hard. And to think about how many iconic characters have been made in such small sizes is a really good exercise in design, and learning how the power of simplicity can help to give you a nice, really refined idea. So I'd say the same goes for landscapes. And you have these huge, sweeping, amazing landscapes, and you don't have the option to go in and render like crazy, as is common to do in pretty much any of that. So here I'm just sort of starting to refine things, getting a little bit closer to kind of how the piece is going to go from here. It's a lot of cleaning up, making mistakes, cleaning up, going back and forth, yeah. So I'm pretty happy with the lighting at this point. Lighting for me is always really important, whether it's pixel art or digital painting or landscape painting outside or whatever else, even traditional fine art stuff. I'm always fascinated by lighting, and so pretty much any time in my piece I'll try to get the lighting right straight away. And so the same goes for this. So I also am not really working on layers. If I was going to maybe be animating this later or something like that, I would obviously work in layers. But for just a flat, still sketch that I just felt like doing at the end of the day to sort of chill out, for me, 1 layer is just easier to wrap my head around. If I start using too many layers, I tend to paint on the wrong layers and just drive myself crazy. So I try not to do that as much as possible. Right now I haven't really done much with the foreground, which is part of the reason, or part of the consequence, I guess, of not using layers is that I tend to work very back to front on my pieces and get the back of the paintings done a lot more than the front of the paintings. Just sort of a traditional painting technique of working back to front. So a lot of that carries into here. So I actually got my start doing pixels way back in the day. I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 doing this stuff, and just loved it. Loved hanging out in the forums, learning about this stuff. I was a big nerd and played a lot of video games, so that sort of aesthetic always appealed to me. And I think it's been really fun lately, in just the past year or two, to sort of do a few of these things and really have fun with them. It's been so long since I've done it. You know, it's kind of cool to come back to a medium after a decade of not doing it. It's pretty wild. So it feels pretty good. It's a really fun one. And if you've ever played games or been interested in that kind of stuff, I'd really recommend trying it if you never have. I'd be fascinated to see what a lot of really good painters that I know would do in this medium. It's a very different one, and I think it could get some really cool results if people did more of it. So if you are going to do an actually finished piece, there's a lot of quote-unquote rules about pixels and the way certain lines look kind of jagged if you have the pixels in the wrong order. And that's the kind of stuff that is the reason it takes so long to do a decent finished pixel piece, is that you just have to spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours cleaning up every single pixel. Furthermore, if you're going to do the anti-aliasing, which is basically, for people who don't know, why things look kind of smooth, if you're going to do that, it just takes forever. Doing every little bit of anti-aliasing by hand. There's a reason computers tend to do it when we paint digitally. So it's a very tedious process, and or at least it can be. And yeah, so you got to keep a lot of that stuff in mind. But it's largely a case of patience to try to finish one of these. So I would like to do one though, just to have a reminder of what it used to be like when I used to try to do this stuff when I was a kid. It also gives you a whole new appreciation for people who do make games that have this look to it. It's amazing just how much work goes into this stuff. So just trying to start getting into this foreground plane, defining some of this kind of dirt, sand stuff going on, trying to get some cool shapes going on. I want something that kind of leads into the composition, but has some nice silhouettes to these rocks and some nice interest here in the foreground. Not quite enough to be like a foreground game background separation sort of thing, but enough to kind of provide some nice visual interest up front. If you are going to do an actually like game looking thing, you have to really keep in mind with your backgrounds to keep them really subtle and tight in colors and values, because obviously you want the foreground to really stand out. So learning to sort of apply the effects of atmospheric perspective in this sense is really important. And again, a good way that pixels can be a great lesson for any digital painter to improve their skills. So you'll see I have a lot of stray pixels, which is the thing that everyone would hate if you really care about the art of pixel art. Pixel art is like, they want to murder anyone if they see stray pixels. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm not calling any of these finished, so I'm cool with that. And even if I was calling it finished, I'd be okay with a few pixels that looked a little out of place, just because I think they do provide texture. I don't think that everything needs to be all slick and smooth and perfect. Not every line in the world needs to be nice and smooth. I don't think that's how anything should look. So, but maybe that's just my own aesthetic coming in. So I really love painting rocks, so obviously you'll see lots of rocks in any of my pieces, whether they're regular old digital paintings or whether they're pixels. It's kind of cool doing them like this though, because you get to again apply the exact same technique that I would use for doing one of my long digital paintings right here, except I just don't have a lot of space to work in, and so I have to be a lot more careful about what things look like and what those shapes are to try to get something that I like. So you'll see I'm starting to redefine some of those silhouettes, painting back in with the background color to get a nice crisp silhouette. You'll see a little bit later on that I used a little bit of a brighter color around the rocks to kind of punch out those silhouettes a bit more. Again, to aid in that separation of the foreground from the background. Maybe I could have added a little bit more mid-ground space. Looking back on this piece, I think maybe another layer of rocks behind these that's a little bit closer than those background cliffs would probably be good, but that's just something I didn't think about at the time. This is only about an hour sketch, so it's about 2x speed. So this whole video is about half an hour. So it's not a terribly long sketch, but it's about how long I would take to do it, just a regular old digital painting. So speed-wise, this stuff isn't any faster. If anything, I'm probably a little bit slower like this than I would be just doing regular digital painting, because you don't get as many tricks to kind of help you along. There are some tricks, but there's just not quite as many as you've got when you're just doing regular old digital painting. I mean, you can photo bash your way to a pretty darn good sketch in like half an hour pretty easily. So it's a little bit trickier with this. So there are some fancy techniques that I've read up on pixels and stuff that do make it a little bit faster, but for the most part, it just takes a lot of time. So I always have a lot of respect for people that do really nice stuff in this medium. It's a tricky one. And, I'd love to do some actually finished pieces just for kicks. I think it'd be good practice for me, and maybe maybe good stuff for my portfolio. People might get a kick out of it. So just refining things. Really the same stuff I do with my digital paintings. Start to define the shapes of something, then start to define the forms of something. So first you go shape down of some value, and then you bring in either a lighter or a darker value and start to bring out some of those forms, whether you're painting in the shadows or whether you're painting in the light sides, just starting to define that stuff. And then I like to kind of work closer to a midtone and then bring in the either highlights or deep shadows and put those shadows in later to really accentuate the form, to make it really pop, and add a little bit of that extra lighting and form to those objects, whatever those happen to be. There's nothing like conceptually brilliant about this piece at all. It's really just it's a cool canyon with a little bit of nice lighting on it. There's nothing amazing about it. There's no real focal point to it. It's not a beautiful piece. It's really just a sketch, and I'm okay with treating it like that. I didn't set out to do the greatest, most beautiful piece of all time. I'm just trying to do a little sketch here. And so you see, as I said, as I start to move along here, I'm getting a little bit more careful with where I'm placing those things. I'm zooming in a little bit more and starting to get a few areas where I really am concerned with each individual pixel and cleaning up some of the lines and stuff. And you start to see some of those rocks get a little bit more refined and a little bit more precise. And that's kind of the direction I would take everything if I actually wanted to finish this, as I would actually go in and make every little part of the painting that considered. So again, very similar to how I would do a regular old painting, making sure that every part of the piece is well considered, and you think about all the decisions you're making. For a sketch, you don't really need to do that because you're just getting an idea down. You're just implying a lot of stuff. But to finish stuff, you really need to make sure your whole piece is considered. And that doesn't need to be rendered necessarily. It just needs to have care taken pretty much everywhere. I always tell people that, because I do a fair number of, I guess, portfolio reviews at this point for students, and they'll show me their portfolio and they'll have some focal point that looks really good. It's beautiful. And then the background and the other stuff in the painting looks really bad. And my advice for them, and my advice for pretty much everyone, is that you need to render the boring stuff and the stuff you don't like enough so that nobody ever looks at it. And that's what I tell people, because it's true. And if you ever look at some of my finished work, there's a lot of boring places in those paintings that nobody will ever look, and nobody ever cares about. They care about the cool focal point. They care about, you know, the big screaming dragon in the foreground. Nobody cares about the little rock off to the side. But if you paint those boring stuff, those boring things, badly enough, everyone will look at them. Everyone will notice just how poorly they're done. It'll be the first thing they see, and really the only thing they'll see. Bad stuff tends to stick out like a sore thumb, and you just kind of can't get away with it. So you'll notice there that I was doing a little bit of that rock outlining and getting all that a little bit more poppy. You know, it stands out a little bit too much because it's the only place that it's happening. You know, the background's not cleaned up and nice like that. So it would be something that I would have to do everywhere. But, you know, for the sake of a sketch, I'm mainly just doing it to show that, you know, I want this stuff to, you know, pop a little bit. So that's the reason for doing that stuff. So trying to get some nice little shapes in here, being a lot more careful about making sure my lines are right, making sure all these nice little pixels are in straight lines and stuff, and trying to at least get it decently clean. Not a lot, but close. So again, just sticking with this same limited palette, I haven't really added a color to my palette in quite a while. And here I am kind of adjusting one of the colors and seeing what maybe a little bit brighter value would look. I'm pretty sure I toned this down in a little bit, but just kind of going back and forth, which is what I tend to do with my values. What I tend to do with any piece is I go a little bit overboard with the contrast and with the intensity of stuff, and then I'll go back in and refine that and tone it down. So my rendering tends to be really, really over the top, and it'll be really intense and dramatic and make the piece look all disjointed and awful. And then I'll go back in and really tone down the values, get the value range nice and subtle and stuff. So, but for the beginning, I'm okay with rendering it crazy. Like, I have a hard time rendering when everything's really tight values. I have a hard time seeing the subtle transitions and stuff myself. So I tend to rely on just kind of going back and making that stuff more subtle later on. I even do the same thing when I'm doing a traditional oil painting, in that I'll tend to do a painting for a while and then have to go back in and scumble over it or glaze over it to tone down my values and kind of tie everything together again. I find that I do the exact same thing of having way too much contrast everywhere, and it just makes a mess of it really fast. So we all tend to have the same bad habits no matter what medium we're working in. So again, I'm flipping my painting back and forth. It's one of my favorite things. I have it set to a shortcut and do it just instinctually all the time. I don't know if I've probably done it a bunch of times in this painting and haven't even noticed, but it's really important tool, both for, personally I use it even when I'm too lazy to like move my hand so that a stroke is easier to make. I'll just flip my painting instead. So there's that purpose, but it also really gives you a fresh eye on your piece, and gives you a fresh look at what things actually look like. And it's like coming to a piece after a few days of leaving it alone. It's that same sort of fresh sense of, oh, that's what this piece actually looks like. This is what I'm noticing about this piece. And again, zooming out, zooming in, seeing where things are at, making sure I'm not losing too much important stuff, and then going back in and refining these cliffs a little bit, because obviously they're really rough and I haven't touched them for quite a while, mainly focusing on that foreground area. So starting to get a little bit of this same care and attention that I've been applying to the foreground. Still a little bit rougher, and I'm okay with that because I'm trying to imply a little bit more detail back there than I am in the foreground. I'm trying to imply a lot of scale and stuff, so you're going to have a lot of random noise in nature, and a lot of large shapes reduced to very small ones, thanks to the perspective and stuff you're going to get. So it's going to look a little bit more scattered and disjointed and stuff. You're going to have more visual noise back there. So I would recommend, if you are going to do this, to go ahead and download Kyle's brushes. They're mainly great for digital painting and stuff, just regular old digital painting. But I actually found these pencil brushes to be really good. I know there's only a few of them, but they're really good. And they really help with those early stages when you're trying to, get in a little bit of interest. Because otherwise you're kind of stuck with really boring round brushes and with no real character to them. And so I'd recommend trying one of those out. And they have no anti-aliasing on them or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about stray pixels and all that, and stray colors getting into your piece. So really getting in there with this 1 pixel brush and noodling away with little details and stuff. This is a really fun part of the painting for me. I really like doing this kind of stuff, and it's probably the reason I should really do a nice finished one of these. Is that I think I would really enjoy doing the full process of finishing one and making everything really, really tight, every little area considered completely, and everything rendered out. Maybe go a little bit higher color count than this so that I could do some actual rendering. But I think it'd be a lot of fun to do that. So I really do hope that some of you do give a shot at this and do try to actually do some pixels if you never have before. It's really, really fun, I promise. It's really refreshing. It's a whole different aesthetic, and if you can paint in anything else, you can totally do this stuff. It's really just a different tool set, and I'm a huge proponent of learning and trying and experimenting with different tool sets. It's a really good practice for an artist to get into, and it'll teach you a lot. It'll teach you a lot about your working process, and it'll teach you a lot about art in general. You learn that basically, all the same principles are going to apply no matter what. And so if you just take those principles and start applying them in this, you might learn a few things, and you'll probably learn a few things that you'll bring back into your other work in whatever medium you're working in. So it all carries over, and it all helps one another. So I always tell people that one of the things that helped my drawing more than anything was taking a sculpture class, and it really did. I didn't draw for an entire month and a half while I was taking the sculpture class, and the first time I drew afterwards, I was noticeably better. I was a little bit shocked at how well I could suddenly draw. Not to say I was great at drawing or anything. I wasn't, but just how noticeably better I had gotten in such a short span of time. It was really, really impressive. So you'd be surprised what sort of things will actually bring out your skills. And same goes for how I learned digital painting. When I first started doing digital painting pretty early on, while I was still a student, one of the things that it really taught me, of all things, was color. And you always hear from people that you should learn traditional, because traditional is really good at teaching you color. And oddly enough, I learned a lot more about color by doing more digital work and doing more speed paintings. There was something really rational about the way that you have to pick colors digitally. That is to say, you have to pick the hue, you have to pick the saturation, and you have to pick the value. And that's it. That's the only controls. And having that sort of mindset helped me carry that over to traditional painting. And so when I started doing traditional painting after doing digital for a while, I started to think of my color picking as the exact same way that I was doing it digitally. That is to say, I would try to figure out what paint tube got me closest to the hue, saturation, and value, and figure out what mixture of colors I could kind of move that color with. So that's something that really helped me, and I really think that this exercise in particular would really help people out with learning a lot about color theory and learning a lot about how to minimize their palettes and how to maximize the use they're getting out of their values and their colors and stuff. And it's amazing what kind of color combinations you can get in there and the odd sort of places that you can apply these same colors and values to. It's a really, really useful thing. So I strongly recommend checking it out and trying this out for yourself. Make a little canvas, start doing some sketching, and I really, really, really think you'll have a lot of fun. And so this sort of brings us to the end of this sketch. I'm just doing a little bit of minor touch-ups at this point, and defining things a little bit tighter. But I'd say in general, this is pretty much done. And eventually maybe I'll show you how to do a full finished pixel art piece, but that means I actually have to do one. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you're going to do some of these. There's a great challenge on Twitter. It's called the Pixel Dailies. I check it out. It's a really good inspiration and resource for just kind of doing little tiny sketches every day of pixel stuff. So if you're interested in kind of turning this into a habit of sorts, I'd check that out, and I think it'll be really good for a lot of people out there. So thanks again, and I will see you next time.